Hello everybody, Jade Hamilton here, and I've come on with Tamsin, my beautiful little Tamsin Lily, to do Wednesday's tag, which is administered by Shara at Reborn Living Dolls, and is called On Wednesdays We Wear Pink. And Tamsin has got on this beautiful strawberry ice cream pink dress. I think it's another Jasper Conran. Actually, I seem to have a thing about Jasper Conran dresses at the moment. It's broderie on glaze. It's got a little sort of very fine, I think is it ribbon or lace? I think it's ribbon trim. And it buttons at the back, and she looks utterly gorgeous in it. If you haven't checked Shara out already, do. She's a lovely lady with lovely babies, and she deserves more subs, so do go and check her out if you haven't. While I'm here, I'm also going to read a couple more chapters of Pinballs. As per all videos where I read, copyright goes to Betsy Byers and HarperCollins. I own absolutely nothing. Make yourself comfy, grab a hot drink if you've got one, and we'll begin. Chapter 7. After supper, the three of them settled in the living room. Thomas J. was writing a letter to the Benson twins. It was addressed to Miss Thomas and Miss Jefferson Benson, Sunnydale Hospital. It started out, "Hi, how are your hips?" As soon as Harvey had seen Thomas J. writing a letter, he'd asked for papers too. He was having a hard time getting started on his letter. He didn't want to write to his father. He didn't know his mother's address in Virginia, but he felt left out not to be writing. Although not put down a word, he kept lifting his head and asking things like, "How do you spell wonderful?" "I hope you're not describing yourself," Carly said, without looking up. She was also writing. The letter was to her mother. "I'm not saying what I'm describing," Harvey said in a superior manner. His eyebrows were raised. "Could it be me?" Carly asked. "Are you by any chance making a list of things I am? Wonderful, exciting, temptatious. Don't forget to mention that my hair is good enough for a cream rinse commercial, and my skin is so soft no Brillo soap pad can smooth it." Harvey tried to think of an answer. He couldn't. Carly broke off. She looked down at her letter. She bent over it. Carly didn't bother with punctuation when she wrote. Her letter went, "Please send for me." No full stop. "I won't cause you any trouble. I have learned my lesson, and anyway, it wasn't me who caused the trouble, it was Russell. From now on, I will just keep out of his way. I will keep out of everybody's way. All I want is to come home. Anyway, Russell hit me harder than he hit him. Talk to the social worker and tell her everything is all right. Make everything all right. I want to come home." Harvey watched Carly writing her letter. He was jealous that she had so much to say. He still hadn't written a word. He shifted in his wheelchair. His calves itched, and his right leg hurt. He thought of writing that to his father, but he didn't think his father would care whether his legs itched or hurt or whatever. In the hospital, his father had seemed very sorry. He'd actually cried. Real tears. He'd said, "I didn't know. I thought I was in reverse. I just thought the car, see, and I didn't know." The tears were not for him, Harvey had sensed. They were for the doctor and the pretty nurse, and especially for the police who were charging him with drunken driving. Harvey had lain there and not shed a tear. Now suddenly he wished he could cry. Quickly he crumpled his blank paper. "I don't feel like writing letters." Thomas J. hovered over his paper. He had lived with the Benson twins for as long as he could remember, but he couldn't think of anything to write to them. All he still had was, "How are your hips?" He lifted his head. "Can you send off a letter with just one sentence in it?" he asked. "No," Carly said, "you've got to have two. We learned that in English." "Oh, you could always end by saying, 'There's a wonderful girl here named Carly who is just like a sister to me.'" She turned to look at him. "Who's the letter going to, anyway?" The Benson twins. Boys? No. Oh, wrong sex," Carly said, turning back to her letter. "They're 88. Wrong age, too. Next year, if they live, they might get to be in the Book of World Records." "Me too," Carly said. "If I live, I'll be the most shifted around juvenile in the world." Carly finished her letter, ending it with 12 pleases, all underlined. She put it in an envelope and sealed it. "Well, that's that." She looked around to see whom she could pester. Harvey was writing at last. He'd given up on a letter, but Carly had given him an idea when she'd mentioned a list about herself. Now he was making a list about himself. The list was entitled "Bad Things That Have Happened to Me." Number 1 was appendectomy. "Sorry, Tamsin? What's an appendectomy?" "It's an operation that you have when you've got a poorly appendix. The doctors and the surgeons, they take it out so it won't bother you anymore." "What are you writing?" Carly asked, sensing it was something secret. She darted over to take a look. She knew that because of his broken legs he couldn't get out of the way. Harvey put the list against his chest. "It's none of your business. Everything I'm interested in is my business." She snatched the list from his hand. She read it aloud. Appendectomy. She looked up. "Hey, have you really had an appendectomy?" "Yes." Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "How big's your scar?" "About that long." "I knew it." she cried. You know what somebody told me one time? He told me that doctors make real tiny slits and then pull all your guts outside and hold them up to the light so they can work better. She paused. She was delighted, which is probably true. And you know how Dr. Welby and all those TV doctors make incisions? The incisions are that long, 14, 15 inches maybe. They ought to talk to this friend of mine. She handed the list back to Harvey. It fluttered to his lap like an old leaf. Carly said, I'm going to make some lists about myself. Mine's going to be called Big Events and How I Got Cheated Out of Them. Carly leaned back on the sofa and began to count off the bad times on her fingers. Number one, and this really was a cheat. I was going to be a majorette in junior high. I even went to majorette clinic. Cost my mum $15. And then I came to find out that you couldn't even try out if you didn't have good grades. And what does good grades have to do with twirling a baton? Tell me that. She looked from Harvey to Thomas J., whose mouth was hanging open. What do 2 E's in English and World Studies and 1 D minus in Math have to do with twirling a baton? I don't know, Thomas J. said. It was the first time he'd spoken softly since he'd arrived. And then, do you know what happened? I was all set to try out for Miss Teenage Lancaster. My talent was baton twirling, which I'd already spent $15 learning in majorette clinic. Anyway, to make a rotten story short, the week before tryouts, I got attacked by my stepfather and sent over here. I never even had a chance. She put her feet up on the plastic footrest. She asked Harvey. What else is on your list? She asked Harvey. He and Thomas J. both looked startled. What else is on your bad things list? She urged. Nothing. I've just got the appendectomy so far. Well, write down 2 broken legs, Carly suggested. I wouldn't exactly call them the fun event of the year. She paused. If it was me, I'd make them number 2 and 3, wouldn't you, Thomas J? Number 2, right leg. Number 3, left. I'm going to write them down, Harvey said. I'm just trying to keep the events in the order they happened. Chapter 8. In the backyard of the Mason house were swing sets and play equipment, because several years ago the Masons had had little children living with them. Carly was on one of the swings, pumping herself so hard the whole swing set was shaking. Harvey was sitting on the back porch in his wheelchair. He'd gotten interested in making as many lists about himself as he could, and Mrs. Mason had brought him a spiral notebook. He'd felt so good about the lists that he'd begun to think that if his mother had made some lists about herself, well, maybe she could have found her identity without going off to make hammocks in Virginia. Carly stopped swinging. She walked over to the sandbox, which in the UK we call a sand pit. Want to see me make a froggy house? She asked Harvey. No. Why, Harvey? I thought all little kiddies liked to watch people make froggy houses. Well, maybe little kiddies do. Harvey, does this mean you're no longer a little kiddie? Have you passed into puberty while I wasn't looking? She piled damp sand over her foot, eased her foot out, and shook off the sand. There. Now during the night, Harvey, a little froggy will come and live in this house. She got up. Oh, I'm bored, she said. She stepped on the sand house and came over to the porch. She sat down on the steps. Harvey? What? Have you ever thought of running away? Harvey looked down at his broken legs. Hardly, he said. She grinned. Harvey? Now what? Have you ever thought of rolling away? He didn't answer. I think about it all the time, she said, looking down at her feet. There was a silence. Then Harvey cleared his throat and said, Young and Restless is on television. He found it hard to concentrate on his list when Carly was around. At any moment she might snatch the book from his hand. He especially did not want her to see that she was number 3 on the list of people he was afraid of. I know Young and Restless is on, she said. I'm getting sick of that show. Actually, the reason Carly wasn't watching television was because the mail had just come and there'd been no letter from her mother. 8 days and not even a postcard. What's this list about? Carly asked. It's called Books That I Have Enjoyed. Oh, Carly said, disappointed. I've already got 18 and I'm just getting started. I could make up my list in 2 seconds. Hong Kong Nurse. That's the only really good book I've ever read. You ought to try it. After that I read Peace Corps Nurse and Nurse of the Yukon, but they weren't as good. Not enough romance. Carly, would you help me with lunch? Mrs. Mason called from the kitchen. The slave of the world is being summoned, Carly said. She got up slowly. She saw that Harvey had written 2 more titles on his list. Harvey did not glance up. He was really enjoying this list. It didn't bring back any unpleasant memories. Not like the list called Promises My Mother Broke. That one had almost made him cry. Almost, but not quite. It wasn't as easy to cry as people thought. Carly walked to the door. There was one other book that I wanted to read, Appalachian Nurse, but I never could find it in the library. The good books are always checked out. Harvey was still writing. At the door, Carly paused. Harvey, when I do run away, will you miss me? I don't know. I'll give you a sample of life without me. She went into the kitchen. Then she called out the window. Pretty bad, isn't it, Harvey? He didn't look up. Chapter 9. Mr. Mason was driving Thomas J. into Maidville to visit the Benson twins in the hospital. Can I come too? Carly asked. Not this time. Not this time. But I got a cousin in Maysville, she lied. She runs a boutique and I want to see what kind of stuff she's got. You can go another time. You can go another time, Mrs. Mason said. They're just going straight to the hospital and back. Then I'll just go straight to the boutique and back, Carly went on. Harvey said, could I go? That's just about 7 blocks from my house. No, Harvey, Mrs. Mason said in a gentler voice. But I wouldn't go home. I just want to stop at the Kentucky Fried Chicken place right across from the hospital. I could get some chicken while they're visiting. No, I wouldn't be any trouble. Harvey moved forward in his wheelchair. Harvey was addicted to Kentucky Fried Chicken. He ate it every night that his father didn't get home for supper. Once he'd eaten it 32 nights in a row. He would pedal over on his bike, put the red and white striped box in his bicycle basket, and pedal home. He would eat in front of the TV, watching his favourite programmes. Now the thought of eating in his own living room made his mouth water for the chicken and the little cups of mashed potatoes and gravy. No, well, if you get a chance, he rolled closer to Mr. Mason. Would you please bring me a box of Kentucky chicken? Please? This is important. That's a good idea. That's a good idea, Mrs. Mason said. Get a bucket of chicken. Get a bucket of chicken. It's too hot to cook. If we have time, Mr. Mason said. Carly and Harvey and Mrs. Mason stayed at the door watching Thomas Day and Mr. Mason get in the car. Then Mrs. Mason turned. Well, how about it, Carly? She said. You ready to learn to sew today? Carly groaned. I tried it once. I made an apron in home ec and I got a C- on it because the gathers were bunched. You have to have a certain kind of hands to sew. Nonsense! I had 2 girls with me last year and I taught them to sew in one afternoon. They made all kinds of clothes. Their pictures are on the mantel and the dresses they made. What happened to them? The sisters? Yes. Why, they went home. Left 2 days before you and the boys got here. I hardly had time to change the sheets. So that really happens sometimes. The people get to go home. Yes, it really happens. Mrs. Mason smiled. Now come on. We better start on a real easy halter top. We'll start on a real easy halter top. Come on, Harvey, Carly said. Harvey was still at the door looking down on the empty street. Don't you want to see me in misery? She followed Mrs. Mason down the hall. You know, I wish I had a twin, she said. Then we could go around fooling people, like if some boy like my twin, I could pretend to be her and say all kinds of crazy things. It would be really fun to have a twin. She could take tests for me, and she looked back over her shoulder. Come on, Harvey. She liked an audience. She always did better when people were watching her. This may be your one and only chance to see me sew, and I'm not kidding. Come on. All right, what did I do wrong now? Carly asked, holding out the halter. Let's see. Mrs. Mason put down her own, saying, "Well, you took a dart on this side, and you didn't take one over here. That's why it doesn't fit." Mrs. Mason began to take out Carly's seam. Carly watched Mrs. Mason rather than what she was doing. After a moment, she said, "Do you mind if I ask you something?" "No, go ahead." "Well, why don't you have children of your own? That's why I'm wondering, instead of taking care of us strays." "I don't think of you as strays, Carly." Mrs. Mason smiled. She put a pin into the cloth and then lowered it to her lap. "I did want children of my own, lots of them. My sister Helen has 4 children. Liz has 5, but as it turned out, I couldn't have any." She picked up the cloth. "Now, Carly, see, I've pinned the dart for you. So along the line." "But why didn't you adopt a child?" "Well, that's what we were going to do. We even had our papers in. Only, while we were waiting, this was a long time ago, they asked us to be foster parents. I didn't want to at first, but why not? I'm curious. Well, I knew I would come to love the child, and I knew the child would leave, and I didn't think I could stand it. I wanted, a child of my own, capital letters, who would never leave. Only nobody has that, Carly." She straightened. "Anyway, it's worked out, Carly. Not the way I thought when I was your age. Not the way I planned, but it has worked out." She smiled. "Now, sorry you're older." Thomas J. sat beside Mr. Mason in the front seat of the car, sliding a little on the plastic covers every time the car went round a curve. He'd never visited anyone in a hospital before, and he had a dread about it. "Why don't you take them some candy?" Carly had suggested. "That's what I'd want if I was in the hospital." "They don't believe in candy," Thomas J. had answered. Carly had stared at him like he didn't have good sense. "Don't believe in candy." Sorry, this is chapter 10. My apologies. Don't believe in candy? How can they not believe in candy? There's Mounds, Mr. Goodbars, Hershey's, Sweet Tarts, Jujubes. I mean, I can understand how you wouldn't believe in ghosts or something, but candy? How can anybody not believe in candy? They just don't. They don't believe in soda. They just don't. They don't believe in soda pop. They don't believe in chewing gum. Woo, they are nuts. She paused and then grinned. Or don't they believe in them either? As Thomas J. sat beside Mr. Mason, he wished he did have a box of candy on his lap. One of those big silver-wrapped boxes of candy he'd seen in drugstores with a bow and a plastic rose on top. It would make it all easier. Here's something for you," he would say, and they, who had never believed in candy, would be overcome. It would be like people who didn't believe in heaven suddenly finding themselves floating upward. They got to the hospital and walked slowly down the green hall. It was an ugly green to Thomas J. Nothing like the greens of nature. Suddenly Thomas J. remembered the garden. He remembered the twins' work, feeling the tomatoes, pulling off dead leaves, lifting their heads to the sun. He stumbled in the hall. "It'll be all right," Mr. Mason said. He put his hand on Thomas J's shoulder, not to push him forward, just to help him along, like planes refueling in the air. 3:20. This must be the room, Mr. Mason said. They entered together. The Benson twins lay on side-by-side beds, and beyond them there was another woman reading a magazine. Thomas J moved between the twins' beds. The twins didn't look like themselves. They'd gotten thinner. They hardly made wrinkles in the covers. "Hi," Thomas J said. "Thomas J, is that you?" "Yes, He'd been afraid they wouldn't know him. Sometimes at home they'd forgotten him. He would go in for supper, and there would only be 2 places at the kitchen table. "Why, Thomas J," one of them would cry, "we forgot all about you. Get yourself a plate." "I'm here for a visit," he added. "Sister, it's Thomas J. I see him." There was a silence. Then both twins reached out their hands to him. He could never remember holding their hands before, and it made him feel strange. He glanced over his shoulder at Mr. Mason. "Have you been back to the house?" one of the twins asked. "Not since I left." "What?" He turned back to the twins. "Not since I left. Don't let things go down. No, the peas are just coming in." "Yes, you've got to can the peas, Thomas J. You've seen us do it enough to know how." "I don't remember though. I don't even know where the jars are at." "We'll stop by on the way home and check on the peas," Mr. Mason said. "Get Papa's gold watch," one of the twins, Jefferson, said. You know where it is?" "Yes, if people know it's there, they'll break in and steal it. Might have already." "Yes, and the gold coins, there's 3 of them. You know where they're at?" "Under the mattress." "Under my mattress," Jefferson said. There was a silence. Jefferson closed her eyes. Thomas J cleared his throat. "Ahem. How are your hips?" he asked. "They operated on us. Put pins in." Oh, now both of them closed their eyes. Thomas J took one step forward. He still held their hands. Suddenly, he wanted to ask about that morning long ago. When he'd come tottering up the road. He felt as if this might be his last chance. He had asked them for details before, but all they said was, "You just come up the drive, that's all to tell." "But what did I have on?" "Oh, let's see. What was it, sister?" "A diaper and a shirt." "Do you still have them? The diaper and the shirt?" At the time, he thought there might be a clue there, a laundry mark or a name. "No, we used them for dusting, but I do remember that there was a dog's picture on the shirt." "A dog?" A dog? Because I've seen him on TV. What's his name, sister? You know who I'm talking about. Lassie? No, a cartoon dog. I'll think of it in a minute. He's white with... But did you go out on the road and look for cars? He'd asked, interrupting. Sister did. Did she see anybody? No. An accident or something? Or something? There wasn't a soul in sight. Later one night, when he was watching a Halloween special on TV, one of the twins had cried, "That's the dog! That's the dog that was on your shirt when we found you." It was Snoopy. The twins were asleep now. Their hands slipped from Thomas J's. Thomas J took a step backward and bumped into Mr. Mason. "Well, we might as well go, Thomas G," he said. "All right." At the foot of Jefferson's bed, even though he knew they couldn't hear him, he said, "I hope your hips get better." It gave Thomas J a sad feeling to go to the Benson's house. Sorry, chapter 11. I'm terrible at marking chapters today. It gave Thomas J a sad feeling to go to in the Benson's house. It seemed emptier than a house without any furniture. He got the watch and the 3 coins, wrapped them in a handkerchief, and put them in his pocket. Then, without looking at Mr. Mason, he said, "I want to see how the peas are." He went to the back door, but he didn't even have to step outside to see the garden was ruined. There'd been no rain in 3 weeks, and the leaves on the plants were yellow. The vines were shriveled and dead. There were no tomatoes. He and Mr. Mason looked over the sad scene. Mr. Mason said, "When you write the Bensons, I wouldn't mention the garden. It isn't likely they're going to see it this year anyway. Anyway, I won't." He paused. "I couldn't." When they were in the car and almost to the main road, Thomas J turned and looked back. "Wait just a minute," he said. Mr. Mason stopped the car. "Anything wrong? Anything wrong?" "No." Thomas J felt like this was the last time he would ever see the house. He wanted to imagine himself walking up the drive in a shirt and diaper, lost, abandoned, dirty, tear-streaked probably. Being left behind had to make a baby cry. He tried to imagine the twins waiting on the porch, arms outstretched, then hurrying down the steps to hug him in his dirty shirt and diaper. He couldn't get a picture of it. "Let's go," he said. They were halfway home when they remembered about the Kentucky Fried Chicken. Harvey was on the front porch waiting for them. When he saw them get out of the car without the red striped boxes, he felt like crying. He rolled himself back to his room and sat staring out the window. There was nothing to see there but an uncut field. "What's wrong with you?" Carly asked from the door. "Is the sight of me in my new halter too much for you? Leave me alone." "What if I don't want to?" "Leave me alone." Carly took 2 steps into the room. "I can't," she said. "I get curious about what's bugging people." She sat down on the bottom bunk. That's because I'm going to be a nurse when I grow up and treat mentals. I'm not a mental. Because we don't say things like mental in that context now, but I'm guessing that Carly either means people who are mentally ill or people who have, I think she means people with learning disabilities. But obviously you wouldn't use terms like she's just used for them nowadays because they're considered a bit dodgy and a bit offensive. So my apologies for that. Huh, that's what they all say. Will you get out of here? Carly stretched on the bed, her chin resting on her hands. Tell me what's wrong, and I'll decide whether you're a mental or not. Pretend I'm a nurse with a long beard. Tell me all. Through clenched teeth, Harvey said, If you must know, I wanted some Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I'm not going to get any. They didn't get the chicken? Carly cried, starting up. She liked bought food much better than home cooked. I was really looking forward to that chicken. Not like me. Now we'll probably have hamburgers, Carly said, and they won't be Big Macs either. You can bet on that. They'll be cooked. Carly! Carly! Mrs. Mason called, Give me a hand, will you? We're gonna grill some hamburgers in the backyard. It'll be like a picnic. See what I tell you? Carly said. I'll probably get grease all over my new halter. And I really worked on that thing too. You saw me. At the door, she turned and said, I've judged your case, Harvey. She grinned. You aren't a mental. Thank you, Harvey said. After the picnic, Carly wanted to cheer Harvey and Thomas J up. So she said, I wish I had somebody to take my picture. Nobody answered. Thomas J sat without looking up. In his pocket was the Benson's father's watch and the 3 gold coins. He'd never felt a heavier burden. Harvey didn't look up either. His hamburger tasted like sawdust. He wanted chicken more than ever. They're having a Sonny and Cher look-alike contest, Carly went on, and I want to enter. You don't look like Cher. Harvey said, I know, I'm going to be Sonny. She waited. There was no reaction. Oh, you guys. Oh, you guys, she said in a disgusting voice. What do I have to do to cheer you up? Go in the house, Harvey said. She spun around and looked at him. She grinned. You know, Harvey, maybe there's hope for you after all. And we'll leave it there for today. I think Carly and Harvey are getting to be friends, don't you? What do you think, Tamsin? Yeah? They're getting to be friends? That's good, isn't it? Speaking of friends, thank you all my lovely friends that watch this channel. Thank you for watching, subscribing, commenting. I really do appreciate it when you do. It makes my day. And Tamsin and I will see you very soon. Can you wave, Tamsin? Good girl. Cheerio, everybody.